What is up, everybody? Mr. Apertus here. Welcome to part 3 of the Revolution period, the Age of Revolutions, which goes from the American Revolution to the French Revolution, and now our last and final piece, which is on Latin American revolutions. Before I tell you any of this, if you don't know where Latin America is, I don't know what to tell you. Watch the news a little bit. But if you really don't know where it is everything south of the United States. It is Mexico, Central America, South America, including parts of the Caribbean. So all of these things are going to be included in Latin America. They're going to have a revolution and a revolutionary period around the same time as the French. And the French Revolution is actually going to be one of the main causes of this. So let's kind of rock and roll. Let's get into some of this stuff. Here's the first thing. I want to flash back a little bit to your Global 1 class and what you learned in Global 1, hopefully. In Latin America, during the Age of Exploration, the Spanish came in and conquered the Americas. They overthrew the Aztec Empire, the Inca Empire, and really set up their empire throughout Latin America. When they did this, they set up a new social class system. And this social class system, which started in the 1500s, is going to continue all the way through the 1700s and the early 1800s. And here is what the social class structure, looks like. At the top, we have a group of people called the Peninsulares. These are people who are born in Spain. They are 100% full-blooded Spanish. These Peninsulares are called that because they are born on the Iberian Peninsula, which is where Spain and Portugal are, and they are the only people who can serve in government. They're the fewest number of people as well. Underneath them, we have a group called the Creoles. The Creoles are also 100% Spanish, but they were not born in Spain. They are born in Europe. So the only difference between a Peninsular and a Creole is where you were born. Underneath them, we have two groups of people. One is called Mestizo, right here. One is called mulatto, which is right here. The mestizos are people who have some Native American, so it could be Aztec, could be Inca, could be any Native American group, and European descent. That would make you a mestizo. And this group is called a mulatto. They are people who are of African and European descent. And then below them, we have Native American and people of African descent. This group right here, again, could work in the government. This group had some rights. They couldn't work in the government, but they could be military officials. This group would be considered our working class, and then this group down here are primarily our peasants. So if we're looking at this as if it was the French Revolution, we kind of have our first and second estates here. Our first and second estate would be the Peninsulares, our bourgeoisie would be the Creoles, and then our sans culotte and our peasants. So with all of this, this system is unfair. And as a result of the Enlightenment, some of these Creoles start questioning this system, and they are inspired by the French Revolution. They see the French Revolution happening. There's this guy Napoleon in power, and they decide that they want to kick out the Spanish because of this unfair system. We have two generals who kind of lead the way here. One is this man right here, whose name is Simón Bolívar, who I'll throw up here in a second for you because it's blocked on my view. The other is a guy named José de San Martín, which is my horrible Spanish pronunciation. These two generals are seen as, there it is, these two generals are seen as kind of the leaders of this independence movement. If you go to South America today, you will see Bolivar's name all over the place. He actually has a country named after him today. That country is called Bolivia. So these two guys are seen as kind of the heroes or George Washington figures of their day. They are successful, and they do kick out the Spanish, and it takes almost 20 years to get the Spanish out of there. But if you look at this map here, these countries in Latin America are going to achieve their independence. Simón Bolívar had a dream that he would unite all of these Latin American countries into one country, which he would call the United States of Latin America. But what he found after they gained their independence was that the Ecuadorians don't like the Peruvians, who don't like the Bolivians, who don't like the Argentinians, who don't like the Venezuelans, because of geography. And the geography in Latin America had separated these people for so long, 300 years, that they almost had their own unique cultures. So none of these people wanted to be unified. So therefore they didn't. And now today, if you look at Latin America, all of these places are separated because of their geography. Another revolution that happens is in Haiti. And in Haiti, which is located right here, this is the Dominican Republic. This is Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Cuba. Haiti is part of this island, which is connected with the Dominican Republic. In Haiti, they are a French colony. 90% of the population who lives there are slaves. And we are talking horrible slave treatment. Some like worse than even what you've learned about or seen or heard about in the United States. Horrible, horrible treatment of slaves. The slaves are treated horrendously. And it's a French colony. So the French in 1791 are going through their revolution. They have the Declaration of the Rights of Man. They're promising equality for all people. And here you have slaves who are being treated horribly in this French colony, which is part of France. So as a result of this and the Enlightenment, some slaves start to hear about this movement going on in France with this French Revolution and believe that they are going to be given their freedom. So some slaves, after hearing that they're going to be given their freedom and believe that they are supposed to get their freedom, decide to rise up against their slave owners. And the leader of this is this man right here. His name's Toussaint Louverture. And pardon my horrible French pronunciation. Toussaint Louverture. He is the leader of this revolution. He is a former slave. He is a slave himself. He was the stagecoach for his master, meaning that he didn't work in the fields. He was kind of a domestic or house servant who drove his slave master around. His father was a king in West Africa, in a small region. And so he kind of grew up somewhat educated as you could be for a slave. And his slave master actually allowed him to read and taught and let him borrow books. And through this, he started reading Voltaire and Rousseau and Locke, and he learned about the Enlightenment. So he rises up and helps form this revolution with other slaves. And what's crazy about this is they are successful. This slave revolt is successful, and it's the only successful slave revolt in the history of humans. I'm not just talking about modern day. I'm going all the way back to ancient Egypt. No slaves have ever risen up. And in Haiti, they do. And they rise up successfully against their slave masters, and they are successful. So we have Latin America that gets independent. We have Haiti that gets independent. And both of these are connected to what's going on in France. I want to kind of shift gears back to France. So all this is going on while Napoleon's in power. And Napoleon is actually going to, while this is going on, is going to make some huge mistakes himself. And mistake number one is he tries to invade Russia, during the cold winter. So there's a cold winter in Russia. He sends his soldiers from France and they get stuck right here right outside of Moscow. He ends up losing hundreds of thousands of soldiers. 800,000 soldiers in France lose their lives. And this is going to kind of be the beginning of the end. And if you know anything about military history, when your opponent is defeated, when they look like they are at their weakest, that's when you attack. So as Napoleon loses his 800,000 soldiers by trying to march into Russia, he gets stuck in the cold winter, so all of his soldiers die. He then marches back, and other countries realize this is the time that we can stop this guy Napoleon and we can invade him. And this cartoon here kind of shows he almost extended his empire too much. So we got Moscow over here. This is supposed to be the Palace of Versailles. And over here we have Madrid, which is in Spain. And by trying to stand on these stilts, he's extended himself too far and he's going to fall into the river and die. Napoleon is actually caught and he's sent to an island called Elba. They kick him out of Europe and they send him to this little tiny island called Elba. And for those of you that don't know, it's kind of a bad place to send him. Napoleon is from this island called Corsica right here. This is France right here. And they send him to an island in the Mediterranean right here. Not a good place to send someone if you're trying to send him into exile. And as a result of sending him into exile, he escapes and he ends up sneaking off the island on a boat and goes back into France. And he comes back to France and he's welcomed as a hero and he rules for another 100 days. So we've kicked this guy out of power in France. We send him to this island in Elba. We bring him back to France again. And then after 100 days, he's captured again. There's a story that he was totally defeated. He's surrounded by him and a couple of his advisors. And this whole army is decimated. And he's like, let's keep fighting. And they're like, bro, you're crazy. So he surrenders, he's captured, and this time he's sent to an island down here in Africa called St. Helena's. Final piece to all this. After Napoleon is done, the question is, what do we do? And they hold this meeting, which was mentioned in the last video, called the Congress of Vienna. And the goal is to reestablish power in Europe because Napoleon took over all these countries. He put his family members in charge, his friends in charge. How do we bring it all back together? And they hold this meeting in Austria, in this capital city called Vienna in 1815. And they decide to bring back all the old rulers, which is called legitimacy. The legit, meaning real rulers. And the legit ruler for France is going to be Louis XVI's brother, who escaped during, while Louis got caught, he's the one that successfully escaped. So Louis's brother is going to come back into power. We try and make all the countries in Europe equally strong. And the goal is to avoid war in the future. This Congress is successful. And really, we don't see war in Europe for almost another 100 years, minus a couple little skirmishes, until World War I. So this kind of holds true. So here's kind of the theme here, bouncing back for a second. We have revolutions happening in other places around the world. We get Napoleon extends himself too much, gets out of power. He's kicked out of power, not before all these revolutions have happened in other countries. And after all that is said and done, we bring back all the old rulers. So really what has happened in France is we have this full circle of absolute monarchy and kind of coming back all the way again through democracy, dictatorship, and now back to a monarchy again. That's what I got. Hopefully you took some notes and all as well. If you have any questions, as always, bring them in and let me know. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.